Hey everyone, tonight we're going to dive into the strangest continent on our planet, and perhaps the most heavily guarded. 5.4 million square miles of ice and mystery sit at the bottom of our world, protected by treaties, patrolled by military forces and shrouded in secrecy that extends far beyond any reasonable scientific purpose. Before we jump into it, like the video if you enjoy mystery as much as us, and let us know in the comments what fascinates you the most about the secrets of this frozen continent. Imagine trying to visit this land tomorrow. You'd need government authorization from multiple agencies. Satellite systems would track your every movement. Military personnel would monitor your communications. Classification protocols would restrict what you could photograph, sample, or even discuss publicly. No other wilderness on Earth operates under such comprehensive control. Yet officials insist this frozen wasteland requires protection measures that exceed those used for active war zones. 47 nations signed the Antarctic Treaty, creating joint authority over an entire continent, while declaring it belongs to no one. But treaty provisions reveal the true scope of control being exercised. Inspection rights allow member nations to examine any facility without notice. Military prohibitions include specific exceptions that seem designed for activities beyond simple research. Nuclear testing bans raise questions about why such restrictions would be necessary in a scientific preserve. 98% of this continent lies buried under ice averaging over a mile thick, reaching depths of nearly 3 miles in some regions. Average temperatures hover around -65 degrees Fahrenheit, making it the coldest, driest, and windiest continent on Earth. Scientists describe it as the closest thing we have to an alien world on our own planet. Yet massive financial investment suggests something far more valuable than scientific curiosity drives continued presence there. Investment alone makes it clear that this empty land is anything but forgotten. American operations consume over $400 million annually, exceeding NASA's budget for Mars exploration. Russian facilities cost hundreds of millions to maintain in conditions that routinely destroy equipment. Chinese spending has tripled since 2010, funding installations in regions chosen for strategic position rather than obvious research value. No indigenous history connects this land to human civilization, creating a unique situation where every discovery feels disconnected from familiar cultural frameworks. Unlike archaeological sites in Egypt or Peru that reveal stories of people like us, drilling through ice sheets potentially uncovers secrets from before human consciousness existed. Recent discoveries suggest those secrets may be far stranger than ancient bacteria and climate records. Discovery came only in 1820 when Captain Fabian von Bellingshausen spotted shores that had been completely unknown to recorded human civilization. No ancient maps depicted it. No myths described its existence. No legends warned of lands beyond the southern seas. Yet recent analysis of historical documents reveals geographical knowledge that shouldn't have existed until modern satellite technology made detailed mapping possible. These operations bring to light rhythms that reach beyond standard scientific study. Ground-penetrating radar surveys map territory with thoroughness, exceeding what scientific hypotheses would require. Communication installations include capabilities designed for intelligence operations rather than research coordination. Transport assets could support emergency evacuations or supply operations on military scales. Underground river systems discovered in 2016 challenge basic assumptions about this frozen environment. Vast networks of waterways flow beneath the ice, carving valleys and channels that span hundreds of miles in complete darkness. These aren't ancient geological features, but active systems carrying water and sediments through landscapes that haven't seen sunlight for millions of years. Lake Vostok represents perhaps the most extraordinary example of what lies hidden beneath the surface. This body of water, roughly the size of Lake Ontario, sits 2.5 miles beneath the ice, sealed away from the world for 15 million years. Russian drilling teams that finally penetrated the lake in 2012 encountered far more than the ancient materia publicly reported. In the closing phase of drilling, equipment troubles made it impossible to follow the finds in real time. Communication blackouts occurred during critical moments when breakthrough to the lake was achieved. Water samples revealed characteristics that contradicted theoretical predictions based on surrounding ice chemistry. Temperatures exceeded expectations by significant margins. Chemical compositions suggested sources beyond the ice that supposedly fed the system. The biological discoveries remain largely classified despite treaty requirements for scientific information sharing. Release samples include organisms with DNA sequences that don't match known terrestrial life forms. Genetic material suggests evolutionary divergence that occurred far earlier than the lake's supposed isolation period would allow. Reports of larger organisms detected through sonar equipment stay restricted despite multiple independent confirmations. In the same sense, gravity measurements detect massive dense objects buried beneath the east ice sheet, formations roughly 200 miles in diameter, creating detectable distortions in Earth's gravitational field. Rather than matching expected patterns for impact craters or natural geological structures, gravitational signatures suggest organized composition with geometric precision that natural processes rarely achieve. As electromagnetic phenomena create navigation problems that point to technological rather than geological sources, compass needles spin wildly in specific zones. GPS systems provide inconsistent readings or lose signal entirely. Radio communications experience structured interference patterns showing regular pulses and harmonic frequencies that suggest artificial generation rather than natural electromagnetic activity. In fact, thermal imaging reveals heat sources operating in coordinated patterns beneath the ice. Some thermal signatures pulse in synchronized intervals across multiple sites, separated by hundreds of miles. Others show geometric arrangements, linear patterns, circular formations, and regular spacings that natural geothermal processes don't typically create. Many of these heat sources appear in locations where no volcanic activity has been detected, while seismic surveys designed to map bedrock geology detect vibration patterns that don't match known geological phenomena. Regular intervals characterize these underground disturbances, sometimes lasting hours or days while emanating from deep beneath the ice sheet. Frequency and amplitude suggest sources far more powerful than typical ice movements or tectonic settling. This coordinated activity appears across multiple locations, as if different sources operate in synchronization across hundreds of miles of continent. Harmonic relationships in vibration patterns suggest artificial rather than natural processes, leading researchers to speculate about unknown mechanical activity beneath the protective ice cover. Since the 1960s, acoustic monitoring in nearby waters has picked up puzzling noises known as bioduck. These steady rhythmic pulses hint at elaborate communication systems, yet no marine species matches their signature. New analysis shows layered harmonics and shifting frequencies, pointing to production methods more intricate than ordinary biology. Access restrictions cluster around regions where these phenomena concentrate, rather than corresponding to environmental protection needs or wildlife habitats. Large areas remain off-limits to international researchers through classifications as sensitive zones without public explanation. Permitted research activities follow strict protocols that limit investigation of the most intriguing anomalies. Every so often, ice cores yield materials that push against standard timelines of technological progress. Tiny fibers emerge with strikingly uniform size and structure, the mark of production rather than accident. Metal particles show geometric precision unknown in natural crystal growth. Some samples even reveal composites, unnatural marriages of elements beyond normal chemistry. Layers of ancient ice dating back hundreds of millennia show traces that resemble manufactured products rather than natural growth. Their uniform features ecotechnology, not geology. To find such materials locked in ice is to challenge the very foundations of how we view technological history. Under that frozen shield, preservation borders on limitless. Microbes have survived 15 million isolated years. Ancient plant matter remains perfectly recognizable. Mountain peaks stand sharp despite eons of wear. If life at the smallest scale can endure, then relics of larger origin, human or otherwise, might still be hidden there. International cooperation officially guides research activities, yet much investigation remains compartmentalized through national programs with independent agendas. Security considerations limit information sharing despite treaty requirements. Most significant discoveries may circulate only among select groups of authorized researchers, leaving public understanding deliberately incomplete. Secrecy reaches the very top. Even presidential briefings contain sections blacked out for decades beyond standard declassification rules. Intelligence budgets bankroll geological surveys, but not for oil, gas, or climate. They're after something else. Universities hold data under lock and key, demanding security clearances where open science should rule. Access is tightly controlled, meaning what we know is filtered through agencies with every incentive to hold back. Public narratives stress conservation and cooperation, but behind the curtain, priorities clearly run deeper than penguins and ice sheets. Whatever secrets rest beneath this frozen land, extraordinary measures taken to control access and information suggest discoveries that challenge fundamental assumptions about Earth's history. This place serves as the perfect location for preserving evidence that could revolutionize understanding of our past, evidence that powerful forces prefer to reveal according to their own carefully managed timeline. Tonight we'll explore what's managed to leak through walls of official secrecy, examine documented phenomena that defy conventional explanations, and investigate why this remote continent requires such unprecedented levels of control and protection. Understanding what lies buried beneath the ice requires grasping the shocking truth about what this continent once was. While governments maintain that the southern pole has always been a frozen wasteland, fossil evidence tells a radically different story, one of a tropical paradise that vanished so suddenly it suggests forces far beyond normal climate change. 50 million years ago, where endless ice sheets now dominate, vast forests of southern beech trees filtered sunlight that fell on ferns as tall as houses. Marsupials bounded through undergrowth thick with flowering plants that have no modern equivalents. Palm trees swayed in subtropical breezes along coastlines, where warm ocean currents maintained year-round temperate conditions. Rather than the lifeless desert we observe today, this land supported ecosystems more diverse than the Amazon rainforest. Scientists know this because the evidence remains frozen in time, preserved like artifacts in a vast natural museum. Coal seams buried beneath the ice contain perfectly intact leaves from tropical trees, so well maintained that cellular structures remain visible under microscopic examination. Pollen samples extracted from deep ice cores reveal exactly what grew there, season by season, across millions of years. These aren't theoretical reconstructions based on climate models. They're direct records of a living, breathing continent that bears no resemblance to the icy wasteland we're shown today. But official explanations for this dramatic transformation raise more questions than they answer. According to mainstream geology, this tropical continent gradually cooled over millions of years as it drifted toward the South Pole through normal tectonic processes. Yet ice core samples reveal something far more disturbing, evidence suggesting the change happened catastrophically fast, as if some force flash-froze an entire continent in geological moments rather than gradual epochs. When researchers examine the boundary layers between warm and cold periods in ice cores, they find perfectly preserved organisms that show no signs of gradual adaptation to cooling conditions. Instead, tropical plants and animals appear to have been flash-frozen mid-growth, preserved exactly as they lived during their final moments. This level of preservation suggests freezing that occurred faster than organisms could react, perhaps within days or weeks rather than millennia. The mystery grows sharper when old charts reveal a continent drawn in flawless detail, long before explorers even knew it existed. Piri created his famous chart in 1513 using source maps he claimed dated to Alexander the Great's time, yet his depiction shows coastlines that match the continent's actual geography, beneath the ice rather than the frozen shore that later explorers would encounter. More disturbing still, the Orontius Phineus map of 1531 shows the entire southern continent, complete with mountain ranges and river systems that weren't officially discovered until satellite radar penetrated the ice in recent decades. Philippe Boissy's 1737 chart depicts the continent divided into two land masses separated by waterways, a configuration that modern surveys confirm exists beneath the ice, but that should have been impossible to map without advanced technology. Greek philosopher Plato's account of Atlantis describes a continent larger than Libya and Asia combined, located beyond the Pillars of Hercules in the open ocean, dimensions and positioning that match this frozen land when Libya and Asia referred to much smaller territories in ancient times. His description of a temperate continent with abundant resources that was destroyed by catastrophic climate change in a single day and night parallels what ice cores suggest happened here. Even more intriguingly, Plato claimed his information came from Egyptian records describing events 9,000 years before his time. If those records were accurate, Atlantis' destruction would coincide with the end of the last ice age and the period of dramatic global climate change documented in ice core samples from the southern pole itself. Charles Hapgood's controversial theory of Earth crust displacement offers a mechanism for such rapid transformation that captured Albert Einstein's attention in 1955. Rather than gradual continental drift measured in inches per year, Hapgood proposed that Earth's entire outer shell could shift position rapidly when polar ice accumulation became sufficiently unbalanced. Einstein's mathematical analysis found no fundamental flaws in Hapgood's mechanism. Enough ice accumulating in the wrong locations could indeed cause the entire crust to slip, seeking a new equilibrium position. Such displacement would move continents thousands of miles from their previous positions in periods measured in thousands rather than millions of years. Applied to the southern continent, crustal displacement theory explains both the rapid freezing and the extraordinary preservation observed there. If this land occupied temperate latitudes before shifting to its current polar position, the sudden relocation would flash freeze everything that existed there: civilizations, ecosystems, and technologies in perfect preservation beneath protective ice. Hapgood's once dismissed ideas find a foothold in modern data, which confirm episodes of true polar wander, the slow, detectable migration of Earth's rotational axis. While most geologists reject complete crustal displacement, some researchers have confirmed that significant shifts have occurred in Earth's history, moving continents hundreds or thousands of miles from previous positions over relatively brief geological periods. But conventional climate explanations struggle to account for the speed and completeness of the transformation recorded in ice cores. Gradual cooling should leave evidence of adaptation periods where organisms adjust to changing conditions over thousands of generations. Instead, the fossil record suggests instantaneous preservation, tropical ecosystems frozen exactly as they existed, with no transition period or adaptation evidence. Buried beneath the ice, this frozen continent preserves evidence in conditions that exist nowhere else on Earth. Organic materials that would decay within decades in normal environments remain perfectly intact for millions of years. Bacterial cultures isolated for 15 million years remain viable and capable of revival when thawed. Seeds and spores germinate after geological ages of frozen storage. Such preservation capabilities raise profound questions about what else might wait beneath that ice. If microscopic organisms survive millions of years in perfect condition, larger structures, buildings, technologies, or entire cities could remain intact indefinitely under the same protective conditions. Whatever existed here when the freezing occurred would be preserved exactly as it was, creating a time capsule of unprecedented scope and fidelity. Recent discoveries of subglacial lake networks suggest this preservation system may be even more extensive than initially understood. Over 140 liquid water bodies exist beneath the ice, some connected by river systems spanning hundreds of miles. These hidden waterways maintain temperatures above freezing through geothermal activity, creating environments where preservation occurs in liquid rather than solid ice. Russian drilling operations at Lake Vostok encountered water chemistry that contradicted predictions based on surrounding ice composition. Instead of gradually accumulated minerals from prolonged rock contact, the water showed purity levels suggesting isolation from normal geological processes. Chemical signatures indicated interaction with materials that don't exist in the local bedrock, as if the water had been in contact with substances that originated elsewhere. Life uncovered in these hidden environments doesn't align neatly with the evolutionary paths we recognize. DNA analysis reveals genetic sequences suggesting these life forms diverged from known terrestrial biology far earlier than their supposed isolation would allow. Some specimens display biochemical processes that don't rely on any documented biological mechanisms, as if they evolved under conditions or influences that don't exist elsewhere on Earth. But official reports represent only fragments of what's actually been discovered in these hidden water systems. Research teams document acoustic signatures, indicating complex multicellular organisms moving through the water, creatures that show organized behavior patterns suggesting intelligence rather than simple biological activity. Yet these findings remain classified despite their potential significance for understanding life's possibilities. Volcanic activity beneath the ice creates additional preservation opportunities through geothermal heating that maintains liquid water environments in regions that should be completely frozen. Recent surveys identify 91 volcanoes beneath the west ice sheet, many showing signs of recent activity that contribute to complex underground ecosystems where life could have persisted throughout the long freeze. Imaging beneath the ice uncovers heat signatures that don't act like natural vents. At times, they flare in regular intervals across far-flung sites. Elsewhere, they align in unmistakable geometry, lines, rings, precise spacing, the sort of order the Earth rarely creates without help. When scientists examine the timing of the Great Freeze, correlations emerge with other planetary catastrophes that shaped human history. Ice core data from the southern continent shows atmospheric changes that coincide with the global flood events preserved in cultural memories worldwide. The same period that saw massive ice sheet melting and sea level rises that created flood myths may also mark when this continent shifted into its current frozen state. Across the world, more than 200 cultures tell flood stories, despite having no contact with one another. The consistency suggests these aren't mere myths but memories. Again and again, the timing points to 10 to 12,000 years ago, the very period when ice cores record Earth's last great climate upheaval. If these tales reflect real events, they may also carry echoes of civilizations that once thrived in lands now buried under ice. The ruins of Göbekli Tepe stand as undeniable proof that advanced knowledge existed long before civilization was meant to. Its astronomical precision and architectural mastery overturn conventional timelines. If such brilliance appeared in ancient Turkey, parallel or even greater accomplishments could have unfolded on this continent during more hospitable eras. These correlations between ice core data and global megalithic construction periods suggest potential connections between climate cycles here and periods of advanced cultural development elsewhere. Many of the world's most sophisticated ancient constructions were built during periods when ice cores show optimal atmospheric conditions and global climate stability. Some researchers propose that this continent may have served as a centre for knowledge preservation and distribution during ancient times. A temperate landmass of continental scale could have supported civilizations with advanced understanding of astronomy, mathematics, and engineering. Cultures that established outposts and shared knowledge with developing societies worldwide, explaining the global distribution of similar architectural and astronomical knowledge in supposedly isolated civilizations. From space, satellites map designs across Antarctica that shouldn't be there, geometry woven into stone, heat, and field. The golden ratio and perfect angular measures so familiar in the world's oldest sacred sites resurface in the continent's bedrock formations and energy patterns. These mathematical fingerprints suggest either remarkable coincidence or underlying principles that connect phenomena here with human constructions across different continents and time periods. If these relationships represent more than chance, they indicate shared knowledge sources or common influences that affected both ancient civilizations and whatever created the continent's anomalous features. Still, access to regions where these correlations are strongest remains severely restricted through environmental protection designations that don't correspond to actual wildlife habitats or geological hazards. Instead, off-limits areas cluster around locations where geometric formations have been detected and where historical expeditions reported discoveries that were immediately classified. Current ice loss accelerates across regions where the most unusual phenomena have been concentrated, suggesting that climate change may soon expose areas that have remained hidden throughout human history. Satellite monitoring shows dramatic retreat rates in west ice sheets, where thermal, magnetic, and electromagnetic anomalies cluster most densely. As the ice retreats, preview discoveries hint at what larger revelations might emerge. Massive Rift Valley systems rival the Grand Canyon in scale, preserved beneath the ice like three-dimensional fossils of the continent's ancient geography. If such enormous geological features remain intact after millions of years, smaller and more delicate structures could also survive in perfect condition. But the same processes that might reveal hidden features also threaten to destroy them through exposure to surface conditions. Rapid melting could damage delicate structures or materials that have been protected by ice for geological ages. Whatever this continent has been preserving might need discovery and documentation before climate change eliminates the preservation system that maintained it. The stakes are rising. Hints of what may lie beneath the ice have already stirred global unease, with nations jockeying for position. The cooperative spirit of the 1959 treaty begins to fray as the continent grows more accessible and more valuable. Behind the facade of science, military preparations advance, communication hubs, transport networks, and hardened infrastructure, all signalling readiness for outcomes that go far beyond research. Whatever is buried here, powerful actors are maneuvering to control the moment of revelation and the narrative the world will be allowed to hear. This is more than buried history. It may be the record of humanity's forgotten cycles. Civilizations may have risen, thrived, and fallen countless times before memory, their traces erased everywhere except here. Locked in its icy preservation, this continent could hold the most important archive of Earth's true past ever discovered. Picture this: November 1929, the dusty archives of Topkapi Palace in Istanbul. German theologian Gustav Adolf Deissmann runs his fingers across a fragment of gazelle skin, examining what appears to be just another medieval map. But as he studies the carefully inked coastlines, his breath catches. The cartographer has drawn something impossible: the northern shore of Antarctica, complete with bays, inlets, and geographic features that wouldn't be officially discovered for another 4 centuries. The map bears the signature of Piri Reis, admiral of the Ottoman fleet, dated 1513. In neat Ottoman script along the margins, Piri explains his sources: ancient charts inherited from the time of Alexander the Great, navigational aids used by Christopher Columbus himself, and maps drawn in the days of Alexander, Lord of the Two Horns. What catches Deissmann's attention isn't just the age of these claimed sources, but the impossible accuracy of what they supposedly depicted. When modern cartographers overlay Piri Reis's southern coastlines onto satellite images, the match proves unsettling. His Antarctica isn't the smooth, ice-bound shore that 20th century explorers would encounter, but the actual rocky coastline that lies hidden beneath miles of ice. A coastline that didn't emerge in any official capacity until ground-penetrating radar technology made subsurface mapping possible in the 1950s. Even stranger, Piri's depiction shows Antarctica connected to South America by a land bridge, a configuration that geological surveys confirm existed during the last ice age when sea levels were 300 feet lower than today. The admiral somehow drew the continent as it existed not in his own time, but as it appeared thousands of years before his birth, when ice sheets locked away enough ocean water to expose the continental shelves. Mathematical analysis of the map reveals projection techniques that shouldn't have existed until modern satellite cartography. The geometric precision required to accurately represent a spherical surface on flat parchment wasn't formally developed until the 20th century, yet Piri's charts demonstrate masterful application of these principles. Either the admiral possessed mathematical knowledge that wouldn't be discovered for centuries, or his source materials originated from cartographers with access to surveying technologies that officially didn't exist. Military cartographer Captain Arlington Mallory spent years analysing the Piri Reis map for the US Navy during World War II. His classified reports concluded that the accuracy of Antarctic coastlines could only have been achieved through aerial surveys conducted from significant altitude, implying either aircraft or spacecraft capabilities that challenge everything historians tell us about technological development in the ancient world. Piri's impossible map might be dismissed as a singular anomaly if it stood alone, but it doesn't. Across European archives, other cartographers working with no knowledge of Piri's charts independently produced depictions of the southern continent that match both his version and modern subsurface mapping. Orontius Phineas completed his world map in 1531, 18 years after Piri Reis, working from entirely different source materials in different regions of Europe. Yet his Antarctica shows remarkable consistency with Piri's version, while adding details that prove even more troubling for conventional timelines. Phineas depicts not just coastlines, but internal geography, mountain ranges, river systems, and topographical features that lie buried beneath ice, thick enough to hide the Empire State Building. Modern radar penetration has confirmed the existence of mountain chains exactly where Phineas placed them. His river systems match subglacial waterways discovered by ground-penetrating surveys in the 1990s. Even specific valleys and ridges appear where his map indicates they should be, despite lying under miles of ice that have accumulated over millions of years, according to official geological timelines. The precision extends beyond general geography to include mathematical relationships that suggest advanced surveying techniques. Distances between mapped features correspond to actual measurements, with accuracy levels that challenge medieval technological capabilities. Proportional relationships between landmasses match satellite calculations, while angular measurements of coastlines align with modern GPS coordinates. Philippe Boitier's 1737 contribution adds yet another impossible layer to this cartographic puzzle. Working in France with access to neither Peary's nor Phineas's charts, Boitier produced a map showing Antarctica divided into two distinct landmasses separated by waterways, an archipelago configuration rather than a single continent. French geographical societies ridiculed this depiction as fantasy, since no explorer had even confirmed Antarctica's existence by that date. 2 centuries later, seismic surveys and ice-penetrating radar confirmed Boitier's fantasy as reality. Remove the ice sheet, and Antarctica does indeed separate into 2 main landmasses connected by mountain chains but divided by below sea level channels that would flood if the ice melted. Boitier had somehow depicted the continent's true geological structure beneath its frozen disguise, using source materials that accurately described bedrock topography. Together, these 3 maps create an archive of impossible knowledge spanning over 2 centuries. Each cartographer worked independently, using different source materials in different countries during different time periods. Yet all 3 produced Antarctic depictions that modern technology confirms as remarkably accurate representations of geographical features hidden beneath ice. Features that official history claims weren't discovered until the 20th century. The convergence suggests source materials that originated from periods when the continent was observable without ice cover, or from surveying techniques sophisticated enough to map subsurface geology through methods that don't officially exist in historical records. Either explanation challenges fundamental assumptions about technological development and geographical knowledge in the ancient world, but maps represent only one strand of evidence suggesting advanced civilizations possessed knowledge about geographical conditions that shouldn't have been accessible to them. Across cultures worldwide, creation stories and flood narratives preserve descriptions of land masses and climate conditions that match the Antarctica revealed by ice core research and geological surveys. Plato's account of Atlantis, recorded in his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, describes a continent larger than Libya and Asia combined, territories that in Plato's time referred to regions much smaller than their modern boundaries. His measurements suggest a landmass roughly the size of Australia or Antarctica, positioned beyond the Pillars of Hercules in the open ocean, where no major landmass exists today. The philosopher claimed his information came from Egyptian priests who preserved records dating back 9,000 years before his own time. If accurate, these accounts describe events that occurred roughly 12,000 years ago, precisely the period when ice cores show dramatic climate changes and when global flood narratives place their catastrophic events. Plato's Atlantis possessed advanced engineering capabilities, including harbour systems that accommodated large vessels, agricultural techniques that sustained massive populations, and architectural achievements that involved moving enormous stone blocks across great distances. The civilization demonstrated sophisticated understanding of astronomy and mathematics, using these skills for navigation, construction, and timekeeping that surpassed anything recorded in official ancient history. Most significantly, he describes Atlantis as a temperate continent with abundant natural resources, diverse ecosystems, and comfortable climate conditions that supported both agriculture and urban development. This description perfectly matches the tropical Antarctica revealed through fossil evidence, a continent that supported palm trees, flowering plants, and complex ecosystems before its catastrophic transformation into the frozen wasteland we observe today. The destruction occurred rapidly, according to this account. Earthquakes and floods devastated the continent in a single day and night, after which it became impassable due to ice and climate changes that made the region uninhabitable. This timeline matches ice core evidence suggesting that Antarctica's tropical period ended abruptly, rather than through gradual cooling processes. Critics dismiss Plato's account as philosophical allegory rather than historical record, yet the specific geographical and technical details don't serve obvious philosophical purposes. The mathematical precision of measurements, the detailed descriptions of engineering achievements, and the careful documentation of governmental structures suggest source materials that recorded actual observations rather than invented moral lessons. Recent analysis of ancient Egyptian records confirms that temple libraries did maintain extensive archives of geographical information dating back many thousands of years. These libraries served as repositories for navigational knowledge, astronomical observations, and historical records inherited from even earlier civilizations. Plato's claim that Egyptian priests preserved ancient geographical records aligns with documented Egyptian practices of maintaining long-term archives. The global distribution of flood narratives provides additional support for Plato's timeline and geographical claims. Over 200 cultures worldwide preserve accounts of catastrophic flooding that destroyed advanced civilizations roughly 10 to 12,000 years ago. Despite geographical separation and lack of contact between these cultures, their flood accounts share specific details that suggest common source events rather than independent mythological development. Norse Ragnarok describes a period when the sun grows dim, the earth sinks into the sea, and fierce blizzards rage, environmental changes that closely parallel the conditions that would have accompanied Antarctica's transformation from tropical continent to frozen wasteland. Hindu texts describe cycles of creation and destruction involving ice and fire, with the current age beginning after a period of global catastrophe that matches the timing of other flood narratives. Aboriginal Australian traditions speak of ice spirits that once ruled southern lands, describing vast territories covered in ice that existed beyond the Great Waters in directions that correspond to Antarctica's position relative to Australia. These oral histories mention conflicts between ice spirits and fire spirits that resulted in the permanent freezing of southern lands, mythological language that could preserve memories of the rapid climate change that transformed the southern continent. Native American traditions from North and South America independently describe great floods that coincided with periods when the sky changed and the earth moved. Many of these accounts specify that the floods were accompanied by changes in star positions and seasons, suggesting pole shifts or crustal displacement events that would have dramatically altered global geography and climate patterns. The consistency of these accounts across isolated cultures suggests either remarkable coincidence or collective memory of actual events. If genuine historical memories underlie these flood narratives, they represent a global archive of testimony describing the period when Antarctica transformed from habitable continent to frozen wasteland, transformation that may have displaced or destroyed advanced civilizations that called that land home. More and more discoveries suggest that sophisticated societies once existed in the times described by ancient flood stories. Göbekli Tepe stands as the most dramatic example of sophisticated construction and astronomical knowledge being applied 11,000 years ago, precisely the period when ice cores show Antarctica's climate transformations accelerating most dramatically. The Turkish site demonstrates engineering capabilities that challenge conventional understanding of Neolithic technological development. Massive stone pillars, some weighing 50 tons, were quarried, transported and erected using techniques that required advanced planning, mathematical precision, and organisational structures supposedly unknown to hunter-gatherer societies. Astronomical alignments embedded in the construction reveal detailed knowledge of celestial mechanics that implies generations of careful observation and calculation. Even more remarkable, Göbekli Tepe was deliberately buried around 8,000 years ago by its builders, preserved beneath tons of soil and debris in a process that required enormous effort and careful planning. The site's abandonment coincides with the period when global climate stabilized after the dramatic changes recorded in ice cores, as if the knowledge it represented was no longer needed or had become too dangerous to maintain. Carbon dating from other megalithic sites worldwide reveals a cluster of construction activity occurring between 12,000 and 8,000 years ago, the exact time frame when Antarctica was undergoing its transformation and when flood narratives placed their catastrophic events. Sites in Turkey, Peru, Egypt, Indonesia and India all show evidence of advanced engineering during this period, suggesting a global network of civilizations with shared technological knowledge. The mathematical relationships embedded in these constructions demonstrate understanding of pi, the golden ratio, and precise angular measurements that weren't supposed to be formalized until classical Greek civilization. Yet these same mathematical principles appear consistently across sites built thousands of years before Pythagoras and Euclid, implying either independent rediscovery by multiple cultures or inheritance from earlier civilizations with even more advanced mathematical knowledge. Astronomical alignments at megalithic sites worldwide point to detailed understanding of celestial mechanics, including precession cycles that take over 25,000 years to complete. Builders incorporated knowledge of star positions from thousands of years in the past and future, demonstrating observational traditions that spanned far longer periods than conventional timelines allow for sophisticated civilizations. These global correlations become even more intriguing when examined alongside geographical knowledge preserved in ancient texts and maps. Sanskrit epics describe aerial vehicles and weapons that operated on principles unknown to modern physics. Sumerian tablets record precise astronomical data that wasn't officially rediscovered until the advent of telescopic observation. Egyptian texts preserve geographical information about regions that remained officially unknown until the age of satellite mapping. The pattern suggests civilizations with capabilities that far exceeded what their technology should have allowed, or access to information gathered through means that don't exist in official historical records. If such advanced knowledge existed during Antarctica's temperate period, that continent could have served as a center for information gathering and distribution that connected the world's developing civilizations. Consider the practical advantages that a large temperate continent would have offered to ancient navigators and knowledge keepers. Positioned at the center of Southern Ocean currents, it could have served as a hub for maritime networks connecting South America, Africa, Australia, and Asia. Its geographical stability would have made it ideal for astronomical observation and long-term record-keeping. Its isolation from Northern Hemisphere conflicts would have provided security for libraries and archives. Ancient mariners describe southern lands rich in resources and inhabited by advanced peoples who possessed knowledge of navigation, astronomy, and engineering. These accounts appear in Phoenician, Egyptian, and Indian records dating back several thousand years, periods when Antarctica was supposedly already frozen, according to official geological timelines. Still, if those ancient mariners were describing the continent during its final temperate period, their accounts preserve first-hand observations of civilizations that were flash-frozen beneath ice when catastrophic climate change transformed the southern continent. The knowledge these civilizations possessed, sophisticated mathematics, advanced astronomy, precise geographical information, could explain the impossible accuracy of medieval maps and the advanced capabilities demonstrated at sites like Göbekli Tepe. Layers of ice hold the story of rapid climate swings as conditions turned from temperate to frozen. Rather than gradual cooling over geological ages, the data shows sudden temperature drops followed by brief warming periods, then final catastrophic freezing. Climate chaos that would have given civilizations little time to adapt or evacuate. During these chaotic transition periods, survivors fleeing the deteriorating continent could have carried their knowledge to other lands, establishing the advanced construction and astronomical observation sites that appear so mysteriously in the archaeological record. The global distribution of megalithic architecture and precise astronomical alignments might represent not independent cultural development, but refugee populations preserving and applying knowledge systems developed during Antarctica's habitable period. Language itself holds clues. Terms for freezing, ice, and southern upheavals turn up in traditions far from any icy frontier. Proto-Indo-European roots include terms describing great cold from the south and ice that covers the land, concepts that seem out of place in the vocabularies of temperate civilizations, but that make perfect sense if these languages inherited memories from populations that witnessed Antarctica's transformation. Flood narratives consistently describe the catastrophe as beginning with unusual celestial events, changes in star positions, disruptions of seasonal cycles, and the sky falling, descriptions that align with the effects that rapid crustal displacement would have produced. If Antarctica shifted rapidly from temperate latitudes to its current polar position, observers worldwide would have witnessed dramatic changes in stellar arrangements and seasonal patterns as the Earth's crust sought new equilibrium. The precision with which ancient texts describe these astronomical disruptions suggests eyewitness accounts rather than mythological invention. Mayan records specify exact numbers of days that the sun stood still during cosmic catastrophes. Hindu texts provide mathematical calculations describing changes in planetary orbits and stellar positions. Egyptian accounts correlate unusual celestial events with specific flooding patterns and geographical changes. These astronomical descriptions match theoretical effects that would result from the kind of rapid crustal movement Charles Hapgood proposed, movement that could shift entire continents from one climate zone to another within decades rather than millions of years. If Antarctica underwent such displacement, moving from temperate latitudes to its current polar position, the change would have created exactly the kind of worldwide catastrophe that flood narratives describe. Physical evidence increasingly supports the reality of such catastrophic events in human history. Magnetic field data reveals multiple episodes of rapid pole reversals, coinciding with periods of global climate upheaval. Geological surveys identify impact layers and shocked materials that indicate cosmic collisions capable of triggering crustal instability. Ice core chemistry shows atmospheric compositions during the transition period that don't match gradual climate change but instead indicate rapid, catastrophic transformation. The timing of these geological catastrophes correlates precisely with the dates that ancient narratives assign to their flood events, and with the construction periods of the world's most sophisticated megalithic sites. Either these correlations represent remarkable coincidences, or they indicate that ancient civilizations were recording and responding to actual geological events that transformed global geography and climate within human memory. The maps of a vanished world emerge. When flood narratives set their events, oceans were lower, exposing shelves and bridges that once joined distant lands. If rapid melting of ice sheets caused the global flooding that narratives describe, the same process would have dramatically altered ocean currents and climate patterns worldwide. Antarctica's position at the centre of global ocean circulation means that changes in its climate and ice cover would have triggered cascading effects throughout the world's weather systems. Rapid cooling of the southern continent would have altered ocean temperatures, wind patterns, and precipitation cycles on every other continent, creating the kind of worldwide climate disruption that could account for the global distribution of flood accounts. Such mathematical precision embedded in ancient flood narratives suggests sophisticated understanding of the mechanisms behind these catastrophic events. Rather than primitive panic in the face of natural disasters, many flood accounts include detailed technical descriptions of causation, prediction methods, and survival strategies that imply advanced scientific understanding of planetary mechanics and climate systems. Sumerian accounts describe instruments for measuring astronomical positions and predicting celestial events that would accompany earthly catastrophes. Egyptian texts provide mathematical formulas for calculating flood timing based on star positions and lunar cycles. Hindu traditions preserve detailed technical specifications for constructing vessels and shelters capable of surviving catastrophic flooding and climate change. These technical details suggest that at least some ancient civilizations possessed scientific understanding, sophisticated enough to predict and prepare for the kind of catastrophic events that would have accompanied Antarctica's transformation. Such knowledge could only have been developed through long-term observation traditions and mathematical sophistication that officially didn't exist until much later periods. The global distribution of this knowledge raises profound questions about information networks that connected ancient civilizations across vast distances. Either multiple cultures independently developed remarkably similar understanding of planetary catastrophe mechanisms, or they shared information through communication and transportation systems far more advanced than historians acknowledge. Evidence is mounting that ancient peoples mastered travel in ways far beyond what conventional history allows. Massive stone blocks moved across impossible distances, precision stonework requiring tools that shouldn't have existed, and astronomical knowledge implying observational traditions spanning thousands of years, all point to capabilities that exceed conventional understanding of ancient technological development. Botanical remains from the Americas have been identified in Egyptian burials, evidence that long-distance exchange networks reached farther than history admits. Such evidence demonstrates that ancient peoples possessed navigational capabilities and geographical knowledge that made global maritime networks possible. If ancient navigators could establish trade routes connecting Egypt with the Americas, they certainly possessed the capability to explore and map Antarctica during its temperate period. The precision of geographical knowledge preserved in ancient maps and texts suggests not occasional lucky voyages, but systematic exploration and mapping efforts that documented worldwide geographical conditions with remarkable accuracy. The sudden cessation of advanced ancient construction around 8,000 years ago correlates with ice core data, showing the final stabilization of Antarctica's frozen state, as if the catastrophic events that froze the southern continent also disrupted the global civilization networks that had made advanced construction and geographical exploration possible. The knowledge and capabilities that produced sites like Göbekli Tepe vanished from the archaeological record just as Antarctica completed its transformation into the frozen continent we know today. Meanwhile, the mathematical and astronomical knowledge preserved at these ancient sites provided the foundation for later civilizations to develop their own advanced capabilities, but in fragmented form rather than the integrated knowledge systems that earlier builders apparently possessed. Classical Greek mathematics, medieval Islamic astronomy, and Renaissance cartography all show signs of recovering rather than discovering fundamental principles that seem to have been known and lost. The Piri Reis map might represent one of the last fragments of this lost geographical knowledge, information preserved in Ottoman archives and Islamic libraries that maintained ancient texts through periods when European sources were being systematically destroyed or lost. Medieval Islamic scholars preserved Greek, Persian, and Indian manuscripts that contained astronomical and geographical information dating back to much earlier periods. Islamic geographical texts from the medieval period describe southern lands with detailed knowledge that doesn't match contemporary European understanding, but that aligns remarkably well with modern discoveries about Antarctica's subsurface geography. These texts suggest that Islamic scholars had access to source materials containing geographical information gathered during much earlier periods, when direct observation of these regions was possible. The preservation of this knowledge through Islamic transmission networks might explain how Ottoman Admiral Piri Reis gained access to maps accurate enough to depict Antarctica's hidden coastlines. His sources could have been copies of copies, passed down through generations of scholars who maintained libraries containing geographical information gathered by civilizations with capabilities that extended far beyond official historical timelines. Similarly, European maps showing impossible geographical accuracy might have been based on translations of Arabic texts, Greek manuscripts, or other preserved materials that originated from periods when advanced civilizations possessed global navigational capabilities and comprehensive geographical knowledge. The accuracy of these maps suggests not lucky guesswork, but inheritance from systematic surveying efforts conducted when such surveys were actually possible. Understanding the true implications of these ancient maps requires recognizing that conventional timelines might be fundamentally wrong about when advanced civilizations existed and what capabilities they possessed. If Antarctica was habitable and inhabited during periods much more recent than official geology suggests, then the flash freezing event that preserved it could also have preserved direct evidence of civilizations with technological sophistication rivaling or exceeding our own. From flawless star charts to shockingly precise maps and sudden leaps in engineering, the evidence hints at a legacy from forgotten civilizations rather than inventions sprung from nowhere. If those earlier civilizations called Antarctica home during its temperate period, then beneath the ice lies not just a frozen ecosystem, but potentially the most comprehensive archaeological site in human history. Every piece of evidence, the maps, the myths, the monuments, converges on the same extraordinary possibility. The most heavily guarded continent on Earth might also be the most important, harbouring proof that human civilization has risen and fallen multiple times throughout history, with each cycle's achievements preserved in perfect frozen archives waiting beneath the ice. The clues scattered across ancient documents and modern discoveries all point toward the same unsettling conclusion. Antarctica isn't just a frozen wasteland that happens to be heavily protected. It's a vast archaeological site containing evidence that could revolutionize everything we think we know about human history, technological development, and the true age of advanced civilization on Earth. If the world's oldest maps, most persistent myths, and earliest monuments all point toward the same hidden truth, then what lies beneath Antarctica's ice isn't just ancient climate data and preserved ecosystems. It's potentially the memory bank of human civilization itself, a frozen archive containing proof of cycles of advancement and catastrophe that stretch back far deeper into history than we've ever dared to imagine. The first image appeared on a message board in 2009. 3 perfectly triangular peaks rising from Antarctica's white expanse, their edges sharp as razors. Within hours, thousands were typing the same coordinates into Google Earth, and you can Google it even right now, search for 79 degrees 58 minutes 39.25 seconds south, 81 degrees 57 minutes 32.21 seconds west. There they stood. 3 massive pyramidal structures, each nearly 2,000 feet tall, their faces meeting in angles that made Giza's pyramids look primitive. No wind erosion, no irregular settling, just geometric perfection that shouldn't exist on a continent where nothing but ice and rock were supposed to survive. Then the images started changing. Resolution dropped. Cloud cover appeared where clear skies had been. By 2012, the same coordinates showed nothing but blurred formations that could have been anything. Google blamed routine updates. Defense officials cited environmental protection. But private satellites kept capturing the same clear pyramid shapes, proving the blur was deliberate. The proportions were what gave them away. The ratio between base and height matched the golden ratio with precision that natural erosion never achieves. Angular measurements aligned with mathematical constants that ancient architects embedded in sacred sites worldwide. Either Antarctica happened to produce perfect geometric accidents, or someone had been building there long before the ice arrived. Ground-penetrating radar revealed the real shock. Beneath the pyramids lay vast hollow spaces, chambers that could swallow entire city blocks. Some extended for dozens of miles, with 300-foot ceilings arranged in geometric patterns that screamed artificial construction. This wasn't random cave formation. Someone had hollowed out enormous underground complexes with engineering precision that challenged modern capabilities. Heat signatures told the real story. Straight corridors of warmth, circles glowing in unison, designs too geometric to belong to nature. Something hidden underground was functioning like a power source, built with purpose. Lake Vostok had been the first hint of what lay hidden beneath the ice. Russian drilling teams reaching the ancient lake in 2012 encountered water that defied every prediction. Instead of simple bacterial soup, they found complex organisms with DNA that didn't match Earth's evolutionary tree. Sonar detected massive shapes moving through the water, objects too large and too coordinated in their movements to be any known aquatic life. What they faced didn't feel like simple failure. At certain depths, systems simply died. Interference came through the radios in patterns too close to speech, and computers recorded streams of data with no physical input, as though an intelligence was inside the circuit. The things they found in that water stays classified despite international treaty requirements, but acoustic recordings leaked anyway. The sounds weren't biological, they weren't geological, they were artificial, complex harmonic structures that suggested manufacturing, computation, or communication systems operating beneath 15 million years of ice. The bioduct sounds discovered in the 1960s had puzzled marine biologists for decades. These acoustic signatures, steady, rhythmic pulses detected in Southern Ocean waters, didn't match any known marine species' communication patterns. Recent analysis has revealed harmonic complexities and frequency modulations that suggest artificial rather than biological generation. These mysterious sounds emanate from the same oceanic regions where satellite imaging detects pyramidal formations and where surveys have mapped extensive underground chamber systems. The geographical correlation implies connection between surface anomalies, subterranean structures, and ongoing acoustic activity that spans the entire Antarctic region. Navigation instruments tell the story best. Over mapped chamber locations, compasses twist uncontrollably, GPS flickers between false coordinates, and all radio signals die out exactly where the ground shows the most heat and seismic stress. In Antarctic airspace, pilots describe encounters with craft beyond explanation, moving with no propulsion, changing course at impossible speeds, and ghosting off radar while still hovering before them. The sightings line up with hotspots of seismic heat and electromagnetic interference. Admiral Richard Byrd's expedition logs from the 1940s described similar phenomena: ice-free valleys where instruments malfunctioned, regions where aircraft encountered atmospheric conditions that defied meteorological explanation, areas where radio communications intercepted signals that couldn't be traced to any known transmission sources. His famous statement about aircraft that could fly from pole to pole at incredible speeds has been dismissed as misinterpretation, yet modern radar operators continue tracking objects over Antarctica that match his descriptions. Speed estimates exceed anything in current aerospace arsenals. Flight patterns suggest propulsion technologies that don't rely on conventional thrust or lift mechanisms. Byrd's accounts of discovering temperate regions beyond the polar ice match thermal satellite data, showing areas where surface temperatures remain above freezing despite extreme polar conditions. These thermal oases don't correspond to known volcanic activity, but instead suggest artificial heating systems maintaining habitable conditions in otherwise frozen environments. The hollow Earth theory finds new credibility when applied to documented discoveries of vast empty spaces beneath Antarctic ice. While complete hollow Earth models remain speculative, the proven existence of enormous underground chambers demonstrates that our planet contains hollow spaces on scales that could support entire civilizations in protected underground environments. John Cleves Sims Jr. proposed in 1818 that Earth contained massive openings at both poles, leading to interior hollow spaces. His theory inspired multiple polar expeditions and influenced generations of explorers who searched for entrances to interior worlds. Modern discoveries of Antarctic chamber systems suggest Sims may have been describing actual geographical features rather than fantasy. Instead of random shifts, the magnetic field shows order, sharp divides that scramble instruments and intervals of pulsing energy that echo the regularity of machines, not minerals. The magnetic anomalies correlate perfectly with locations where thermal imaging detects artificial heat sources and where seismic monitoring records mechanical vibrations. This correlation across different measurement systems implies integrated technological networks rather than coincidental natural phenomena. Time distortion reports from research teams add another layer of mystery. Chronometers malfunction in ways that affect atomic clocks, GPS timing systems, and mechanical timepieces simultaneously. Team members experience subjective time differences despite remaining together throughout their activities. Radio logs show timing discrepancies that can't be explained by equipment error or atmospheric interference. These temporal anomalies cluster around areas where electromagnetic effects are strongest, suggesting that whatever generates the electromagnetic disturbances also influences local time flow. Either these effects result from natural phenomena unknown to current physics, or they indicate technologies that manipulate fundamental forces in ways that affect space-time relationships. Deep ice drilling encounters materials that challenge basic assumptions about Antarctic ice formation. Geometric crystalline structures appear at specific depths with mathematical precision that natural ice processes don't achieve. Metallic particles show artificial arrangements and compositions that suggest manufacturing rather than natural deposition. Some ice samples contain composite materials, engineered combinations of elements that don't occur naturally. Microscopic analysis reveals uniform structures that indicate industrial production methods. These artificial materials appear in ice layers that supposedly formed millions of years ago, suggesting either contamination from modern sources or evidence of ancient manufacturing capabilities. The distribution of artificial materials through ice cores follows patterns that correspond to global catastrophe chronologies, preserved in flood narratives and geological records. Rather than random distribution, anomalous materials concentrate in layers that formed during periods of rapid climate change and electromagnetic disruption. Current satellite monitoring reveals increasing activity in regions where these phenomena concentrate most heavily. Thermal signatures show rising energy output. Electromagnetic disturbances display more complex patterns. Seismic vibrations increase in frequency and amplitude, suggesting that whatever systems operate beneath the ice are becoming more active. This correlation between increasing anomalous activity and accelerating ice loss raises questions about cause and effect relationships. Either climate change happens to be exposing regions where unusual phenomena concentrate, or increasing activity beneath the ice contributes to accelerated melting through artificial heat generation and electromagnetic effects. research access remains severely restricted around areas where phenomena cluster most densely. Environmental protection designations create no-access zones that don't correspond to wildlife habitats or geological hazards, but instead surround coordinates where satellite imaging has detected anomalous formations and where research teams report equipment malfunctions. Access controls in the Antarctic are enforced with stricter measures than those guarding nuclear weapons programs. Personnel undergo psychological evaluation and sign agreements that restrict discussion of discoveries for decades beyond normal scientific publication timelines. Classification levels applied to some research exceed those used for weapons development or intelligence operations. Building and sustaining the chamber networks hidden under Antarctic ice would push the limits of today's engineering. Excavating spaces that large through solid rock and ice, maintaining structural integrity across geological time periods, and operating heating and electromagnetic systems using power sources that remain undetected all suggest engineering capabilities that exceed known technological development. If these systems represent ancient construction, they indicate civilizations with technological sophistication that far exceeded anything achieved by known historical cultures. If they represent non-human engineering, they suggest intelligences with capabilities that operate on entirely different technological principles than human development has pursued. The scale of underground infrastructure detected through radar surveys implies not isolated installations, but comprehensive civilization-level development. Chamber networks that span continental distances, integrated power and communication systems, and coordinated electromagnetic activities all suggest organized societies rather than simple outposts or research facilities. Whatever created these systems possessed both the knowledge and resources to construct infrastructure that would survive geological catastrophes and continue operating through millions of years of burial beneath accumulating ice. Such planning implies either extraordinary foresight or technological capabilities that included precise prediction of future geological events. All signs point toward one astonishing conclusion. Antarctica may shelter living technological civilizations in immense underground complexes, concealed beneath the ice for untold ages. Whether these represent ancient human civilizations, non-human intelligences, or something else entirely, their existence explains the extraordinary measures taken to control access to and information about the continent. The pyramid formations, vast chamber networks, and operational technological systems all point toward inhabitants rather than ruins. The electromagnetic communications, coordinated heating systems, and sophisticated navigation disruption capabilities suggest not archaeological remnants, but active communities with technologies that exceed current human development. If Antarctica harbours living technological civilizations rather than frozen archaeological sites, then the secrecy surrounding the continent protects not historical discoveries, but ongoing contact with intelligences whose capabilities and intentions remain unknown to public awareness. The most heavily guarded continent on Earth might also be the most populated, hosting neighbours whose existence governments prefer to study in secret rather than acknowledge to a world unprepared for such revelations. January 17th, 1939. Two massive German ships cut through the icy waters of the Southern Ocean, their holds packed with construction equipment, prefabricated shelters, and enough supplies for extended operations in Earth's most hostile environment. The Schwabenland expedition wasn't heading to Antarctica for scientific research. They were going to claim territory for the Third Reich. Captain Alfred Richer commanded the mission with military precision that had nothing to do with glaciology. His aircraft launched from the ship's deck to conduct aerial surveys, but instead of mapping ice formations, they were dropping aluminum swastika markers across 232,000 square miles of Antarctic territory. The Reich was literally planting flags, declaring sovereignty over a continent that no other nation had seriously tried to claim. But why would Hitler's war machine invest enormous resources in a frozen wasteland when Europe was on the brink of global conflict? The expedition's true purpose remains classified in German archives, yet leaked documents suggest the Nazis weren't interested in ice and penguins. They were searching for something specific, something that ancient maps and occult research had convinced them was waiting beneath the polar ice. The Ahnenerbe, Heinrich Himmler's mystical research division, had been studying ancient cartography and exploring connections between German mythology and global flood legends. Their researchers claimed that Nordic myths contained encoded geographical information describing land beyond the southern seas, territory that possessed resources and knowledge crucial for the Reich's 1,000-year empire. Occult research teams within the Ahnenerbe focused intensively on Tibetan traditions describing hidden kingdoms beneath polar ice. These traditions spoke of advanced beings who possessed technologies that could influence weather, control electromagnetic forces, and manipulate physical matter in ways that defied conventional understanding. Nazi expeditions to Tibet in 1938 had returned with maps and texts that supposedly confirmed Antarctica's significance as a source of hidden power. This German expedition documented geographical features that weren't supposed to exist: ice-free valleys where aircraft instruments malfunctioned, regions where magnetic compasses spun wildly, areas where radio communications intercepted signals that couldn't be traced to any known sources. Their reports described phenomena that matched accounts from much earlier Antarctic expeditions, suggesting that whatever the Germans were investigating had been active for decades. Construction activities during the 1939 expedition focused on establishing permanent installations rather than temporary research camps. The Germans built facilities designed to withstand Antarctic conditions indefinitely, with supply caches and equipment stockpiles that suggested long-term occupation plans. These weren't scientific stations, but military outposts positioned to control access to specific geographical locations. Aerial photographs from the expedition show construction at sites where modern satellite imaging detects thermal anomalies and electromagnetic disturbances. The correlation suggests that Nazi researchers had identified specific locations where unusual phenomena occurred and were positioning installations to study or exploit whatever was causing those phenomena. U-boat activity in Antarctic waters increased dramatically throughout 1940 and 1941. Despite the enormous distances and supply challenges involved in operating submarines so far from German bases, Allied intelligence intercepted radio traffic indicating regular supply runs to coordinates near the Antarctic Peninsula, suggesting that German installations were not only operational, but required ongoing support for activities beyond weather monitoring. Some captured German naval documents reference ice-free oases and thermal valleys in Antarctic regions where no such features appeared on Allied maps. These references suggested that German surveys had discovered geographical conditions that enabled extended operations in areas that should have been uninhabitable. Some intercepted communications mentioned discoveries that confirmed the ancient accounts and validated the theoretical predictions. The most troubling intelligence reports came from captured U-boat crews who described delivering special materials and technical personnel to Antarctic coordinates where no official German installations were known to exist. Under interrogation, some crew members mentioned underground facilities that could accommodate entire submarine crews, with artificial heating and electromagnetic shielding that protected sensitive equipment from polar conditions. Allied codebreakers intercepted German communications referencing the Southern Project and ice base operations throughout 1942 and 1943. These messages indicated ongoing construction activities, successful equipment tests, and personnel rotations that suggested substantial German presence in Antarctica, despite the enormous logistical challenges and resource requirements such operations would demand. British intelligence analysts noted that German Antarctic activities correlated with increased U-boat presence in Southern Ocean shipping lanes. Submarines that should have been hunting Allied convoys instead seemed to be supporting supply lines to Antarctic installations. The pattern suggested that whatever the Germans were doing in Antarctica was considered strategically important enough to divert critical military resources from primary war objectives. As the war turned against Germany, U-boat activities near Antarctica intensified rather than decreased. Multiple submarines that should have been defending Reich territorial waters instead operated in Southern Ocean regions with no apparent military value. Post-war analysis suggested that some U-boats may have been transporting key personnel and critical materials to Antarctic installations as German positions collapsed in Europe. The fate of these final U-boat missions remains unknown. Several submarines documented as departing German ports in early 1945 never returned and were never accounted for in post-war naval records. Their last recorded positions suggested southern headings toward coordinates that matched earlier German Antarctic expedition sites. Admiral Karl Dönitz's cryptic statements about German submarine capabilities added fuel to post-war speculation. His claim that the German submarine fleet could attack the most distant targets and that U-boat crews had discovered an earthly paradise beyond conventional naval ranges suggested operations that extended far beyond known German territorial waters. American intelligence became increasingly concerned about continued German activity in Antarctic regions. Reconnaissance flights detected installations at coordinates where no Allied facilities existed. Radio monitoring intercepted signals using German codes from Antarctic locations. Satellite surveillance showed artificial heat signatures and electromagnetic disturbances in areas where German expedition reports had described unusual phenomena. These intelligence concerns led directly to Operation High Jump in 1946, officially described as a training exercise, but actually representing one of the largest naval expeditions in American history. Admiral Richard Byrd commanded 13 ships, 33 aircraft, and over 4,000 personnel in what was supposedly a routine mapping mission to Antarctica. The scale revealed the operation's true purpose. No training exercise required aircraft carriers, destroyers, and submarine support for mapping activities. No scientific survey needed armed personnel and military communication security. The expedition was equipped for combat operations, not geographical research. Byrd's public statements before departure mentioned expectations of encountering unusual conditions and hostile forces that could challenge expedition personnel. His choice of words suggested awareness of specific threats rather than general concerns about Antarctic environmental hazards. Military briefings included preparation for scenarios that went beyond weather emergencies or equipment failures. The expedition's activities focused on regions where German installations had been detected rather than areas of scientific interest. Flight patterns concentrated around coordinates that matched German expedition sites and continued German radio transmissions. Survey priorities targeted locations where intelligence reports suggested ongoing construction activities. Then something went wrong. The expedition ended abruptly after only 8 weeks instead of the planned 8 months. Official reports blamed equipment failures and budget constraints, but personnel interviews revealed encounters that weren't supposed to happen during a routine mapping mission. Byrd's debriefing statements described aircraft that could fly from pole to pole at incredible speeds and warned that America needed to prepare defences against hostile regions in polar territories. His descriptions of advanced aircraft capabilities didn't match any known German technology, suggesting encounters with capabilities that exceeded all known aerospace development. Flight crews reported radar contacts with objects displaying performance characteristics that violated known aerodynamic principles. Ground personnel documented electromagnetic interference that disrupted all electronic systems simultaneously. Radio operators intercepted communications in languages that didn't match any known human speech patterns. The most unsettling reports came from teams that approached areas where German installations had been detected. Personnel described discovering facilities that showed signs of recent occupation, but that were far more advanced than anything in German military arsenals. Equipment found at these sites displayed technological sophistication that exceeded Allied capabilities, suggesting either extraordinary German engineering achievements or access to technologies from unknown sources. Some facilities contained power systems that operated without detectable fuel sources. Others housed communication equipment that could transmit across global distances using methods that telecommunications engineers couldn't identify. Most disturbing were discoveries of materials with properties that didn't match any known manufacturing processes. Alloys that maintained structural integrity under extreme temperature variations, electromagnetic shielding that blocked all known radiation types, and crystalline components with optical characteristics that suggested artificial rather than natural formation. Post-mission debriefings were immediately classified at levels exceeding normal military security protocols. Personnel received reassignments that separated crew members who had served together during the expedition. Many were required to sign non-disclosure agreements that extended far beyond normal military service obligations, with enforcement provisions that suggested national security implications. Admiral Byrd's subsequent statements became increasingly cryptic as government censorship tightened around Operation High Jump discoveries. His warnings about threats from polar regions took on urgency that standard military concerns couldn't explain. His references to advanced aircraft capabilities suggested knowledge of technologies that officially didn't exist in any nation's arsenal. The expedition's abbreviated timeline and immediate classification of results indicated discoveries that required immediate policy response rather than routine scientific analysis. Within months, American Antarctic policy shifted from competitive territorial claims to international cooperation agreements that culminated in the 1959 Antarctic Treaty. For nations locked in open rivalry, the sudden ease of Antarctic treaty talks stood out against the gridlock of other Cold War agreements. Former enemies suddenly agreed to demilitarize an entire continent, share research activities, and submit to mutual inspection protocols that they wouldn't accept anywhere else on Earth. Soviet participation proved particularly revealing. Stalin's regime, paranoid about Western espionage and reluctant to accept any international oversight, eagerly signed agreements that granted foreign powers inspection rights to Soviet Antarctic installations. This unprecedented cooperation suggested discoveries that transcended ideological conflicts and required coordinated response from all major powers. The treaty's specific provisions revealed the true scope of what required international control. Nuclear testing bans included exceptions for peaceful purposes that seemed designed to accommodate research into technologies that generated nuclear-level energy without conventional weapons applications. Military activity prohibitions contained loopholes that allowed scientific support operations using equipment and personnel that exceeded typical research requirements. Inspection rights granted all treaty nations access to each other's Antarctic facilities without advance notice, cooperation that extended far beyond normal scientific collaboration. These provisions suggested that all participants needed to monitor each other's activities because discoveries at any single location could affect global security considerations. That the treaty took effect so quickly implies the powers involved shared hidden information, making unity mandatory in Antarctica. Rather than competing for Antarctic resources or the territory, former enemies united to control access to discoveries that could destabilize global power structures if they became publicly known. After the treaty took effect, intelligence funding for Antarctic missions spiked, even though officials insisted the region had no military value. The US, the Soviets, and later China all planted permanent operations there, burning through resources greater than those spent in live war zones. Those chosen for Antarctic intelligence work faced vetting, stricter than even nuclear weapons programs demanded. Families and associates were scrutinized, and surveillance continued long after assignments ended. Clear signs that whatever they encountered required secrecy for life. Messages from Antarctica travelled under encryption meant for only the highest level military traffic. Daily code changes and command level authorization turned even routine supply calls into top secret exchanges. The technologies detected at German installations during Operation High Jump may have provided crucial evidence about capabilities that existed beneath Antarctic ice. If Nazi expeditions had made contact with advanced civilizations or discovered technological systems operating in underground installations, Allied forces would have inherited responsibility for managing information that could transform global technology and power relationships. Post-war German rocket scientists recruited through Operation Paperclip brought knowledge of advanced propulsion research that included theoretical work on electromagnetic and gravitational manipulation. Some of these scientists had participated in Antarctic expeditions or reviewed research data from German polar operations. Their subsequent contributions to American aerospace development may have included insights gained from Antarctic discoveries. Aerospace milestones didn't arrive in isolation. The jet age, radar's sudden refinement, and the rise of early computers all advanced fastest during periods when Antarctica drew huge shares of military budgets, suggesting hidden knowledge from the ice seeped into conventional science. Today's Antarctic programs operate less like science expeditions and more like military campaigns. Personnel need clearances far beyond normal research standards, communications run on encryption reserved for classified missions, and supply lines move under heavy security more fitting for weapons than weather stations. 6 decades after the treaty, Antarctica is still run like a military outpost, evidence that the discoveries which first drove nations to cooperate are not relics of the past, but ongoing concerns. Today's security doesn't just shield ruins or fragile ecosystems, it protects activities demanding the same secrecy as the post-war findings that started it all. Unlike nearly every other alliance reshaped by wars, revolutions, and rivalries, Antarctic cooperation never wavered. Enemies became partners, partners became adversaries, yet the continent's agreements held firm, hinting that the knowledge buried there outweighs all political divides. The pattern points toward a remarkable conclusion. Operation High Jump discovered evidence of technologies, and possibly intelligences, that made international cooperation essential for managing discoveries that no single nation could safely handle alone. What began as competition for Antarctic resources transformed into collaborative efforts to control information about capabilities that could destabilize civilization if they became publicly known. Antarctica's conflict didn't end, it went underground. A shadow war now rages between forces bent on revelation and others determined to keep the truth frozen away until the world is ready to know what lies beside us. The drill came up wrong. When Russian scientists finally broke through to Lake Vostok in 2012, they expected simple bacterial life preserved in water that hadn't seen sunlight for millions of years. Instead, they found organisms that didn't fit anywhere in Earth's known evolutionary tree. Published research papers describe these findings in careful scientific language, unique bacterial communities, and previously unknown genetic sequences. But the implications rattled the biological research community. Life forms displaying cellular structures that operated on principles unlike anything documented in terrestrial biology. Genetic material that suggested evolutionary pathways, isolated not just from surface life, but from the fundamental processes that shaped life on Earth. Sonar readings from the lake detected acoustic phenomena that marine biologists couldn't classify. Rhythmic patterns with mathematical precision that suggested artificial rather than biological origin. Sound frequencies that shouldn't have existed in an isolated water body, yet continued broadcasting with consistency that implied ongoing generation rather than geological echoes. Some similar mysteries emerge from Antarctica's documented bioduck sounds, acoustic signatures detected in Southern Ocean waters since the 1960s that marine researchers still can't explain. These aren't random animal calls, but structured patterns with harmonic complexities that suggest technological transmission. Ocean monitoring stations record these sounds emanating from specific coordinates that correspond to regions where other unexplained phenomena cluster most densely. Fossil discoveries across Antarctica challenge paleontological understanding in ways that rarely make headlines. Documented finds include penguin remains showing proportions that exceed known bird anatomy by dramatic margins. Marine fossils display modifications that suggest technological enhancement rather than natural evolutionary development. Plant fossils from supposed Ice Age periods show tropical characteristics that indicate climate conditions radically different from official geological timelines. The McMurdo Dry valleys have yielded skeletal remains that anthropologists classify as anatomically modern humans, despite appearing in geological contexts that predate known human presence in Antarctica by tens of thousands of years. These discoveries remain largely unpublished, stored in research facilities under access restrictions that exceed normal paleontological protocols. Antarctica's radio arrays detect repeating patterns that don't trace back to any catalogued cosmic source. Deep space monitoring equipment registers transmissions with mathematical precision and information density that suggest artificial origin. Yet directional analysis indicates these signals emanate from beneath Antarctic ice rather than from space. Objects crossing Antarctic skies appear on military radar with movements that break every rule of conventional aviation. Documented reports from multiple independent sources describe craft that accelerate without apparent propulsion systems, change direction at speeds that should destroy conventional materials, and maintain flight patterns that violate known aerodynamic principles. These encounters aren't isolated incidents, but follow geographical patterns that correlate with regions where other anomalies concentrate. Aerial phenomena appear most frequently over areas where ground-penetrating radar has mapped underground chamber systems, and where thermal imaging detects organized heat signatures. The correlation suggests coordination between surface and subterranean activities rather than coincidental events. Across the continent, sensors detect electromagnetic activity that doesn't fit any known pattern. Magnetic fluctuations leave pockets where compasses spin and readings clash. Radio communications experience structured interference that displays linguistic characteristics despite containing no recognizable language elements. GPS systems register coordinate drift that suggests local space-time distortion rather than the simple magnetic interference. Those bound for Antarctic missions undergo psychological conditioning far beyond what ordinary polar research demands. Military psychologists conduct evaluations designed to assess reaction to extraordinary circumstances and non-standard contact scenarios. Classification briefings include sections addressing alternative intelligence and non-human interaction protocols. Teams report their gear failing in rhythms that look more deliberate than accidental. Electronic devices shut down simultaneously across different systems. Timing instruments display synchronization errors that affect atomic clocks, GPS receivers, and mechanical chronometers together. Communication systems register data inputs that don't correspond to any detected sensor readings. Beyond machinery breaking down, teams encounter time behaving in ways that defy normal perception. Team members experience subjective time differences despite remaining together throughout their activities. Radio logs show conversations that participants remember differently than recorded timestamps indicate. These effects cluster around coordinates where electromagnetic and thermal anomalies reach peak intensity. Ice core analysis reveals materials embedded at specific depths that display artificial rather than natural characteristics. Microscopic examination shows geometric structures with architectural precision that natural ice formation processes can't achieve. Crystalline arrangements display mathematical relationships that suggest deliberate construction rather than random mineral deposition. Some ice samples contain composite materials, engineered combinations of elements that don't occur naturally in Antarctic geological formations. Spectral analysis reveals molecular arrangements that require manufacturing processes not available through atmospheric or geological interaction. These artificial materials appear consistently in ice layers that correspond to periods when global catastrophe events occurred, according to flood narratives and geological records. Beneath Antarctica's ice, satellites detect heat sources that pulse in coordination, patterns extending for dozens of miles in shapes too precise to be natural. Circular heat patterns pulse in synchronized rhythms that suggest artificial energy generation rather than geothermal activity. Power output levels indicate energy systems that rival industrial installations despite operating beneath miles of ice. Ground-penetrating radar surveys map underground spaces that dwarf the largest known natural cave systems. Chamber complexes extend across hundreds of miles with geometric regularity that implies artificial excavation. Tunnel networks connect separate regions of the continent with engineering precision that would challenge current construction capabilities. Disruptions to navigation don't follow natural patterns. They concentrate at specific points on the map, as if anchored to hidden locations beneath the ice. Pilots report instrument failures that affect multiple independent systems simultaneously. Electronic devices experience synchronized malfunctions that suggest external interference rather than environmental conditions. Deep drilling operations encounter resistance patterns that indicate artificial materials rather than natural ice and rock formation. Drill bits contact surfaces with hardness characteristics that exceed known natural materials. Core samples reveal construction materials embedded at depths where they couldn't have arrived through surface deposition or normal geological processes. Chemical analysis of these materials reveals elemental compositions that don't match surrounding geological formations. Isotopic ratios indicate formation under conditions not available through natural Antarctic environmental processes. Some samples contain elements in concentrations that suggest artificial accumulation rather than natural distribution patterns. Access restrictions cluster around regions where these phenomena concentrate most heavily, rather than corresponding to environmental protection needs or wildlife conservation requirements. Designated no-access zones surround coordinates where thermal, electromagnetic and acoustic anomalies reach peak intensity. Research permits exclude investigation of the most intriguing phenomena under environmental protection justifications that don't align with actual ecological concerns. Access to Antarctic sites is locked down with controls more severe than anything used for nuclear programs. Personnel undergo background investigations that extend to family members and personal associates. Communication monitoring continues throughout post-assignment careers. Classification levels applied to some discoveries exceed those used for active military intelligence operations. In a world where countries clash over everything, Antarctica remains the one arena where their security efforts move in lockstep. Former enemies coordinate information control with efficiency that they don't achieve in any other international agreements. The consistency suggests shared knowledge that makes cooperation essential rather than optional. Antarctic personnel face psychological screening that test how they'd react to non-standard intelligence and extraordinary biological diversity. Their training even includes modules on alternative communication and non-human interaction protocols. These preparations extend far beyond normal polar research requirements and suggest anticipation of encounters that official narratives don't acknowledge. Recent years have brought increased activity in regions where anomalous phenomena cluster most densely. Satellite monitoring shows rising thermal output from underground sources. Electromagnetic disturbances display more complex patterns and higher intensity levels. Acoustic transmissions show increased frequency and broader harmonic ranges that suggest expanding rather than diminishing activity. Current ice loss patterns correlate with regions where these phenomena concentrate, suggesting possible connections between underground activity and accelerating surface melting. Either climate change happens to be exposing areas where unusual processes operate, or increasing subsurface activity contributes to ice loss through artificial heat generation and electromagnetic effects. The scale of infrastructure required to generate the phenomena documented across Antarctica exceeds current human engineering capabilities. Power systems that operate beneath miles of ice while generating continental-scale electromagnetic and thermal effects would require energy sources and distribution networks that challenge known technological development. The ability to maintain signal clarity across continental distances, even through solid rock and ice, points to communication technologies beyond current science. The mathematical precision of these transmissions suggests artificial intelligence capabilities that exceed known computational development. Whether these systems represent ancient technological inheritance or non-human engineering, their existence indicates intelligence with capabilities that far exceed official understanding of what's possible in polar environments. The coordinated nature of phenomena across vast distances implies organized societies rather than isolated installations or individual entities. Scattered evidence points to technological societies operating in subterranean systems hidden for ages beneath the frozen shield. The biological anomalies, electromagnetic systems, thermal installations and acoustic transmissions all suggest not archaeological remnants, but ongoing communities with technologies that exceed current human development. The urgency with which global agencies respond makes it clear. This is about present danger or opportunity, not dusty artifacts. Classification protocols protect not ancient secrets, but active information about capabilities and intelligences that continue operating beneath Antarctic ice. The most heavily guarded continent on Earth harbours neighbours whose existence governments study in secret, while maintaining public narratives that deny their reality. Whatever exists beneath Antarctica's ice possesses technologies that could revolutionize human understanding of physics, biology, and engineering. Yet access to this knowledge remains restricted through international agreements that prioritize secrecy over scientific advancement. The question isn't whether extraordinary discoveries exist beneath the ice, it's whether humanity will be allowed to learn from them, or whether powerful forces will continue protecting secrets that could transform civilization itself. The Thwaites Glacier is dying. Every satellite pass shows another Manhattan-sized chunk breaking away from what scientists grimly call the Doomsday Glacier. The collapse happens so fast that climate models can't keep up. Ice that should have lasted centuries vanishes in months. But the real shock isn't how quickly it's melting, it's what emerges from underneath. Thermal cameras catch the truth that visible light can't see. Heat sources pulse beneath the ice in patterns too organized for geology, too powerful for biology. Whatever drives this collapse isn't coming from above through warming air, it's burning upward from below, melting Antarctica from the inside out. Pine Island Glacier tells the same story. Retreat rates that doubled, then tripled, then exploded beyond any mathematical model. NASA's Icebridge flights capture images of exposed bedrock that make geologists nervous. Instead of smooth foundations carved by millions of years of ice flow, the revealed landscape shows features that shouldn't exist. Rift valleys with walls too straight, mountain ridges with angles too perfect, surface patterns that look almost planned. The valleys stretch for hundreds of miles with geometric precision that makes the Grand Canyon look accidental. Straight walls drop thousands of feet with mathematical regularity. Parallel ridges run in formations that suggest artificial construction rather than natural erosion. These aren't random geological features, they're organised, systematic, engineered. Greenland offers a preview of what's coming. As Arctic ice melts, it exposes Viking ruins that archaeologists thought were myth. Medieval settlements emerge from ice that supposedly buried them for centuries, but preservation levels suggest they were frozen yesterday, not hundreds of years ago. Stone foundations remain sharp-edged. Metal artifacts show no corrosion. Organic materials preserved like specimens in a laboratory freezer. Even stranger, Greenlandic ice reveals artifacts that predate Vikings by thousands of years. Tools and structures appear in perfectly preserved conditions despite existing in contexts that official timelines can't explain. If Greenland's small ice sheet hides evidence of unknown civilizations, what might Antarctica's continental ice cover be protecting? Recovery teams position themselves around Antarctica with military precision that has nothing to do with normal archaeological work. These aren't university expeditions with brushes and measuring tapes. They're rapid deployment units with heavy equipment, satellite communication, and personnel trained for immediate site lockdown. Someone knows what's coming. The teams include specialists in metallurgy, advanced materials, and technologies that don't appear in standard archaeological training programs. Classification procedures operate under security protocols that exceed those used for weapons development. Whatever they expect to find requires immediate evaluation for national security implications rather than academic study. China's Antarctic expansion tells its own story. Installations triple since 2010, concentrated around regions where ice retreat accelerates fastest. These aren't research stations, but permanent bases designed to control territory, rather than conduct experiments. Construction includes capabilities for housing large populations and processing industrial-scale operations. Russian facilities expand around coordinates that match locations where electromagnetic disturbances concentrate most heavily. Transportation infrastructure includes runways capable of handling heavy cargo aircraft and port facilities designed for year-round operations despite extreme conditions. The scale suggests preparation for discoveries that require immediate large-scale response capabilities. American operations focus on regions where thermal imaging detects the strongest underground heat sources. Military contractors handle construction projects that civilian research institutions normally oversee. Security perimeters extend far beyond what environmental protection would require. Someone's preparing for something that goes beyond scientific discovery. These electromagnetic signals grow stronger as ice coverage decreases. Monitoring stations detect transmission patterns that intensify proportionally with local ice loss. Frequency ranges expand into spectra that suggest increasing power output from sources that remain beneath the ice. Signal complexity increases with characteristics that resemble expanding communication networks rather than geological phenomena. Radio telescopes positioned across the continent track these transmissions with directional precision that confirms subterranean origin rather than cosmic sources. The signals display mathematical relationships and information encoding that suggest artificial intelligence capabilities. Harmonic patterns contain embedded sequences that resemble digital communication protocols despite using transmission methods that don't rely on conventional electromagnetic radiation. As the ice recedes to expose its most enigmatic shapes, radar installations detect an intensifying flurry of aerial activity overhead. Flight patterns show coordination between surface phenomena and underground electromagnetic sources. Object characteristics exceed known aerospace capabilities, while displaying response behaviors that suggest intelligence rather than automated systems. Seismic monitoring reveals vibration patterns beneath retreating ice that intensify with exposure to surface conditions. Underground movement signatures suggest mechanical systems activating in response to decreasing ice cover pressure. Harmonic frequencies indicate power systems coming online after extended dormancy periods. The vibrations synchronize across continental distances, implying communication or coordination between separate underground installations. Frequency analysis reveals mathematical progressions that suggest countdown sequences or preparation protocols rather than random geological settling. Those selected for Antarctic duty undergo evaluations that explore how they'd respond to first contact scenarios and interactions with intelligences unlike our own. Their training prepares them for findings that move far beyond fossils or microbes, while security sessions cover protocols for revelations capable of shifting the balance of the world. Current ice loss projections suggest that within decades, vast areas of Antarctica will be ice-free for the first time in human memory. If the anomalies detected beneath today's ice cover represent preserved technologies or civilizations, their exposure could trigger the most significant archaeological discoveries in human history. The governmental preparations suggest awareness that such discoveries are inevitable rather than speculative. Data shows the warmth building below will soon breach the surface once the retreating ice thins further. Whatever generates the organized thermal signatures detected through satellite monitoring will eventually become directly accessible rather than hidden beneath protective ice layers. The power levels suggest energy systems that could transform human technological capabilities if their principles could be understood and applied. Each stage of melting clears the way for transmissions that carry farther and reveal deeper layers of complexity. Recent analysis reveals linguistic characteristics that suggest adaptive rather than automated transmission. Responses that seem to adjust to changes in surface conditions rather than following predetermined protocols. The adaptivity implies conscious intelligence rather than mechanical systems operating on fixed programming. Organisms rising out of the thaw defy long-held ideas about where life can and cannot exist. Species that demonstrate radiation resistance, temperature tolerance, and metabolic processes that suggest adaptation to conditions that don't exist anywhere else on Earth. Genetic analysis reveals evolutionary development that appears optimized for survival in artificial rather than natural environments. The convergence of all these phenomena around regions of accelerating ice loss suggests coordinated preparation for surface exposure rather than coincidental revelation through climate change. Either natural processes create this coordination through unknown mechanisms, or intelligence beneath the ice anticipates and prepares for environmental changes that will end millions of years of concealment. In contrast to their usual divisions, world powers are aligning seamlessly, treating this with urgency far beyond normal scientific matters. Resource allocation, personnel deployment, and security protocols operate on scales that suggest anticipation of discoveries that could destabilize existing power structures. International cooperation transcends normal competitive relationships, implying shared knowledge that makes collaboration essential. The pattern points toward a remarkable possibility. Those who control access to Antarctic information know that ice loss will inevitably reveal what has been preserved beneath the ice, and they're positioning themselves to control the narrative when humanity encounters evidence that challenges everything we believe about our planet's history and our place in the universe. Scientific research programs continue investigating Antarctic phenomena with intensity that suggests urgency rather than routine academic curiosity. Funding levels exceed those allocated to active space exploration programs. Personnel commitments span decades rather than typical research project timelines. The long-term investment implies anticipation of discoveries that will require extended study and careful management. If ruins, artifacts, or even beings emerge as Antarctica's ice disappears, they will tell a story that official history isn't prepared to acknowledge. Evidence of advanced civilizations that existed during periods when such development was supposedly impossible. Technologies that operate on principles not included in current scientific understanding. Possibly intelligences that have maintained themselves beneath the ice throughout the long freeze, waiting for the moment when protective barriers melt away and contact becomes inevitable. The ice is melting faster than anyone imagined. Satellites confirm that what should take centuries is happening in decades. Thermal forces from below push the process beyond all climate projections. Within our lifetimes, vast areas of Antarctica will stand exposed for the first time since advanced human civilization existed on Earth. When that ice finally disappears, humanity may discover that the true history of our planet has been waiting for us all along, preserved in perfect condition beneath the white continent, a history that reveals cycles of rise and fall, of knowledge gained and lost, of civilizations that achieved greatness only to vanish beneath catastrophic change. Or perhaps we'll find something even more extraordinary. Guardians who chose to remain hidden beneath the ice, protecting secrets until the world was ready to receive them. The countdown has begun. The ice melts, the secrets emerge, and nothing will ever be the same. What do you think is really hidden beneath Antarctica's ice? Ancient civilizations? Lost technologies? Something else entirely? Let us know in the comments what theory makes the most sense to you. And if this journey into the world's greatest mystery has left you wanting more, hit that subscribe button. Because the truth about our planet's hidden history is just beginning to emerge from the ice.